met him, we had good conversation and we instantly connected. We have this affinity for creative ideas and solving major problems. We would get on the phone and, I mean, there would be no subject that we talk about, from physics to everything. Like, we just talk about everything. And so, unbeknownst to me, he came to a power networking conference a year later. And Dr. George and him was really good friends. So they were talking about succession. And he told Dr. George, I got this young guy I just met, I think you should meet. He may be a good candidate. This was 8 years ago. 8 years ago. 8 represents the number of new beginnings.
That's right.
So, he told Dr. George, who was told by Dr. Ruff, and all these doctors led to a student. And I never knew that he told Dr. George this until last year. When Dr. George told me, you know, what laid heavily on my decision about you was the recommendation by this man.
Woo! Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I was like, Doc, really? It had nothing to do with my looks or my charisma or nothing like that? My design. And he said it weighed heavily on this person. There is someone in your life that God has set up who knows exactly what your potential is and where it belongs. All you have to do is show up. Look at the person on the side, you say, show up.
Show up.
Yes, ma'am.
Show up, show up.
Show out.
So I wanted to take an opportunity here to actually introduce you to power networking in real time. It was because of the power of God in this man who saw someone that I was not yet and was able to convey it to a powerful man who would be able to put me in a position of power. Somebody say power.
Power.
So, Joe, I want to say openly, I want to say here, thank you so much for being obedient to God and seeing in me from all those conversations that I had the potential, even though I may not have believed if you told me that you did this,
right,
I probably wouldn't have accepted it.
Well,
but you allowed God to use you, and from then our conversations blossomed. You just give him a big round of applause. I mean, so I want to jump right in. I say that to say, if you understand who he is to me, then I think a lot of things will make sense. He's a serial ideation guy. He's got at least about 8,462 ideas every single day, because he calls me and tells me about them. And then we ideate together, right? And one of those ideas, which was about 3 years ago, was a book. And here's the book. It's called Black History 365.
oh yeah.
Now, I don't need to spell this out to you guys. Black History 365. So I was a little skeptical. And I told him. And we talked about it. And when he revealed all of the information in this gigantic annal, that's what it is. And we talked about it, and I was just so privileged to be a part of giving advice. And so the fact that he's here now, that this was an idea some time ago and now it is a reality. Oh, along with a friend of his, Dr. Walter Milton Jr., who was here, he's a co-founder. They were here, he was here last year. And so, Joe, I want to take this moment to explore some of the ideas that you have on the table. And particularly, let us know what's happening with Black 365 now. I know the goal, what the long-term goal is, but just share a little bit so that they can see and understand what I know about this project.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to be here. Black History 365 is our love letter to the whole country and the world, not just half of the country. We are so politically divided, and we want to reach everyone with this message. One of the things that we did is we did a SWOT analysis about a year in. So when Dr. Milton called me, he's the trailblazer. I could never do this myself. He called me up and he said, I've been thinking about doing this, developing a Black history curriculum, K through 12. And would you join in? I told him later you had me at hello. Let's do this. We had no school saying, if you do this, we'll buy it from you. Both of us suspended, put on the shelf our very successful businesses for 2.5 years, 12 16-hour days. It's like Groundhog Day every day. About a year in, we did a SWOT analysis on strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we decided we were going to develop something, because we really wrestled. We want this to be truth-centric and solutionist. Those are the two words we built this whole thing around. And so we came up with an idea called the elephant experience to identify some of the most challenging topics in our country. For years, we've been hearing talking heads on TV saying we need to have a national conversation about race relations in America. And so we decided that we were going to put together this elephant experience. We would talk, we'd walk straight into Uncle Tom. 3/5 of a human being. Should we tear the statues down? Reparations. Scientific racism. Can a white person ever fully understand the Black experience in America? Black people in the deadly dance with both American political party machines. Manifest destiny. The difference between Booker T. Washington philosophy and W.E.B. Du Bois philosophy. And wherever there was a binary choice, we decided we are not going to teach students what to think, we're going to teach them how to think. So we're going to provide both sides, and if there's a third rail, we're going to throw that in there too. And so the book here, it weighs 5.5 pounds, starts in ancient Africa because we didn't want to reinforce the notion that Black history started with enslavement. Over 100 pages. We talk about the genius, the creativity, hunting, gathering, fishing, agriculture, industry, Mansa Musa, all the African kingdoms, the ancient kingdoms that transcend the current geopolitical lines. Now we're ready for the good, the bad, and the ugly of the last 4 centuries. And then we end in Canada because another thing we didn't see in other curricula. What about Canada? What happened to people that somehow were able to shake themselves loose of the Stockholm Syndrome or whatever other issues were being dealt with, the fear of the unknown and the fear of the known, and to move to the north, and in the middle of the 1850s and the fugitive slave laws pushed them to Canada? What happened to them? So we spend over 100 pages talking about that. So that's the kind of gives you a sense of what we're trying to do. We're now in at least 400 school districts around the country. And that's not counting religious schools, home schools, other types of schools. And we just came out with a Latin history 365, similar in size, 9 through 12, and the K through 8 will be out in about a year. And our desire, once again, is another love letter to the country, to discuss through the lens of history.
Wow, wow. You can give a clap right there. You know, when we spoke about this, the passion that exudes from you, your color started to get a little bit more melanated every time. Yeah, keep me hanging around you, dog. That's what the thing is. And just the fact, I love the elephant in the room metaphor that you use to solving problems. I mean, we get on the phone and we talk about major problems, political, we talk about everything. And I just love the way that your process, your thought process is starting out, and we can toggle from scientific to spiritual, and you never miss a beat there. So first of all, I want to thank you for actually being one of the friends who told me you wanted to do something, and you actually did it. And it's like, it's here, like I can see it, right? That's inspiration. So in terms of people being inspired by the story, I love a great narrative of any product. How it happens and how it comes to the market is just as important as why it's relevant to you. And so how can people actually engage in this book?
Well, I wanted to mention, if I could, just for another 20 seconds or so, my story came from Canada, left home when I was 17, started hitchhiking all around North America, long-haired hippie, dope-smoking fool, and ended up having a conversion experience. 7 years later, became one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA with the Washington Bullets Wizards. And that's really where my gateway came, because their position in life attracts a lot of insincere people. A lot of players don't even know what your agenda is until about 7 or 8 years later. Survived 6 coaching changes, 3 GM changes, biggest miracle of all. And during that time, they began to ask questions. I didn't have a clue. I ended up hooking up with Ivan Van Sertova out of Rutgers. He became my historical guide. Spent hours on the phone with me, passed away in 2009. Sent me a lot of his books, and then I would go through every one of his books and I'd talk back to him. And then he'd let me call him up and I'd talk back to him. Say, what about this? Great point, but what about this? And he was extremely patient with me, and that's part of my story of how we came to this point. It's like a professor, a student comes up and says, how long did it take for you to prepare for that speech? The professor looks out the window, looks back and says, about 30 years. So since 1980 is when I began to get serious about studying. And then this is part of the fruit with Dr. Milton and put in our team of 70 people now, putting all of this material out now as our love letter to the country and the world.
And Joel too is not just, we're gonna get ready to get some questions here from the audience. Joel is also, he holds one of the world's largest artifacts of Black history, memorabilia and important documents.
It's not the word largest, it's very comprehensive. I've done 2 exhibits at the United Nations, had over 1 million people show up. 3 at the White House, 4 at the Clinton Presidential Library, many at times at all the different places around DC. And then 1/5 of the imaging in this textbook comes from the collection, images never seen before. And how people can get this is just visit us at our booth out right around the corner, Black History 365, or go to blackhistory365.org, or even you're receiving some material. A young man is going around handing out material to you, and just check out that material also about the Rosetta Stone project.
Yeah.
Good. Give him a hand. We got about 2 questions here. Coming up about 2 questions. Any questions? There we go.
All right, hold on.
Am I good? Okay. You got to hold the mic, bro. You got to hold the mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shalay Camilla from Boston, Massachusetts. I do have a question about how do you go about validating the truth of the information that you're receiving in the research and making sure that it's actually accurate to history? Because as we all know, history has been rewritten by other people. So how do you go about making sure that it's actually accurate?
Excellent question. When you're in a jar, you can't read the label. When we were in the jar, I mean, we were, it was like research, write, edit some more, research, rinse and repeat, do that day after day after day. And when you're in a jar, it's very hard to be objective about what you're doing. So we developed an advisory board around us, because in the multitude of counselors, there's safety. Folks like Smokey Robinson, Kathy Hughes, Paul Griffin, who's the former VP of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, and many others. We have 28 people on our advisory board. And we had eminent historians like Dr. Marvin Delaney out of Texas, Dallas, Texas area. He's the curator of the African American Museum there in Dallas. And I'll tell you, he was brutal. You know, he would look it over. We have Dr. George Fraser on our advisory board. And he was brutal, and different ones were brutal, and they would just come back and say, you need to check this out, or what about this, what about that? So they began to read the label for us. And then when you put a product, a resource, educational resource out into the marketplace, that's when the real reading the label happens. And the response we're getting after about 4 years, as I mentioned, about 400 school districts like Brooklyn, LA, Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Seattle, Houston, we're in Florida, Miami-Dade, and we're under the radar screen and everything else. But that's the kind of response we're getting from eminent historians. It's one of those things where we can say we got a great product, but when someone like Dr. George Fraser says on video that it's the finest curriculum he's ever seen, it brings tears to my eyes, to our eyes, because it's just, once again, our labor of love.
Wow. Wow. Come on, y'all can do better than that. This would have been one of those books that we put on the coffee table for sure. But first of all, give another round of applause for Dr. Joel Freeman. And you can definitely see, thank you, Bill. You can check him out at the Black History 365 in the Expo area.